work is always in plain sight, and yet often we may stroll by, barely noticing the brilliant balance between the natural world and created space. This is the work and art of the trailblazing landscape architect Claire Bennett. Born in 1928 in Burlington, Vermont, inspiration came at an early age, surveying blueprints while perched on her father's lap.
My father, he was in the construction field, and I was my father's little girl. I was his boy, actually. And so I sat on his lap, and I fell in love with those blueprints, and they were blueprints back then. I just loved them.
She would become the first female to enroll in the mechanical drawing class at her high school, where she showed a gift for math and design.
And high school gave me some kind of test, and I beat out all the boys for mechanical interests and talents. The instructor said, "You really want architectural drawing," so he just taught me architectural drawing. I knew I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to make those drawings that look like that.
I guess what I take away from Claire and my friendship with her is the importance that you shouldn't compartmentalize your life, but people are extremely important. And as a designer, you're designing space for people. There's a great sensitivity to how people use space. So not only is it functional, but we seek to layer an artistic, almost psychology, to space. So the widths of walks, the places where people can sit, whether that's in the sun or in the shade. These are things that landscape architects are trained to do. And certainly in Claire's spaces, in her gardens, you can see those kinds of aspects.
I think as I've gotten to know Claire over the years, I've understood that you have to think about the long-term impact of your work and not the photo op, not the instant cutting the ribbon and then it's beautiful, but understanding how, like, this place has been here 20 years and it's still beautiful. It's very simple. It's timeless. It's not a style. It's just a beautiful place to be.
When it was time for college, Claire's first choice was MIT, but it was flooded with veterans home from war, taking advantage of the GI Bill. Claire's mother and her school guidance counselor struggled to find just the right place for Claire to realize her dream of becoming an architect.
I'll hear it till I die. What'll we do with her? And so the guidance counselor said, well, Harvard has an architecture program.
Plan B for Claire's future? Radcliffe College, at the time a woman's option for the then all-male Harvard University. After graduation and marriage, her husband's career brought the family to the Hoosier State, where Claire learned about landscape architecture under the tutelage of Fritz Lundsten, one of the country's finest landscape architects.
He called me and said, would you come to work? And I said, I don't know anything about landscape architecture. He said, you know construction, you know design, I'll teach you the rest.
Fritz was very instrumental in teaching and very adamant about how he wanted things done. So he would come in and look at your work and advise you as how he would have it done, and then you make those changes and pursue those designs in that direction. So he was a very strong teacher.
And so every time we went on a trip, he'd say, that's a beechwood forest, and he'd try to point out the different trees and how they related to each other. But otherwise, I'm just self-taught.
Later, she would become the first employee of the new and growing landscape architecture firm, Browning Day.
You invited me out to lunch.
I remember that. bruises are doing well.
Yes.
I don't think any of us particularly thought of her as being a woman versus a man. It was what she knew. It was what worked to fill the niche that we needed. And I don't think that there was ever any kind of hesitation because she was a woman.
Claire was trained as an architect, and I think part of her brilliance is an understanding that architecture relates to a site. You know, a building doesn't float. It's always landed, and there's an inside-outside relationship there. And she was expert at putting together the bricks and mortar kinds of spaces, plazas and walls and columns and these beautiful, beautifully detailed pieces.
Seeking to balance her time between a career and raising 4 young children, in 1974, she launched her own landscape architecture firm, Claire Bennett Associates Incorporated. Often working in collaboration with other firms, including Browning Day Mullins Deerdorf and Sasaki Associates, she contributed to the design of many major public sites, including White River State Park, the downtown Indianapolis Canal Walk, and the Indianapolis Museum of Art, now Newfields. She was also instrumental in the landscape design of many private residences, including the homes of conductor laureate of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, Raymond Lepard, and his life partner, Jack Bloom.
It had been an orchard, that's why it's called Orchard House, of course, that struck me as being a very attractive image to maintain, but in the way of floral things. And then Claire came up with this idea of a lake connecting one end to the other.
This was one big flat field, and when we brainstormed with Claire about the vision of what we wanted, she had the brilliance of designing the pond and the falls and using the fill to contour the front acreage and plant a prairie in that. And then over the course of this somewhat less than 5-acre thing, we've planted by tree spade well over 100 trees.
Placemaking or landscape architecture is certainly focused on how people experience space, whether it is the long view across a space, like the river behind me, right? Or whether it's a place that's quiet, and sometimes quiet spaces where people have the opportunity to reflect actually have white noise, water, for example, in terms of fountains.
Good landscape architecture elevates the place that you're in to be a place where you can have memories and that tie you back to why you're there. And in our world, history and sense of who you are really important to being grounded and happy in your world.
She was one of the first women to serve as president of the American Society of Landscape Architects. She was also the first woman president of any Harvard club in the country. And today, the Claire Bennett Legacy Award recognizes Indiana landscape architects who embody her legacy of service to the profession and community. But her first service always was to family.
I would get up at 4 in the morning and work on the projects before the kids went to school, because I was still, making sure that they got on the school bus and had their lunches packed, and I was there making cookies when they got home, and I was doing mimeographing for the PTA or whatever at school, and trying to be the all-around mother. A female had to work harder. They had to know more than the guys if they wanted to get that job. I served on the Landscape Contractors Association somehow, and that's why I deliberately went so I could hear the contractors talk about the problems of this and that and what they were doing about it. And So that was helpful.
She was very inquisitive. She's very, very intelligent. And so she was able to pick up things a lot quicker than most people would and be able to use that knowledge. And in pursuing even in the landscape design, she picked that up very quickly and enjoyed it so much.
In 1984, tragedy struck the Bennett home when Claire's husband Paul suffered injuries from an auto accident, which left him in a coma for nearly 6 months. After waking, he was disabled the rest of his life, some 19 years. But Claire Bennett would draw inspiration from the tragedy. At Newfields, her vision for a garden for everyone was to create a space where everyone, including those with differing abilities, could enjoy its beauty.
I think Claire had some great insight into disabilities and impairments as it relates to how people experience the built environment. And so the Garden for Everyone was an opportunity, I think, for her to express her innate understanding of perhaps what her husband was going through.
The Garden for Everyone is special in the aspect of the accessibility to the garden for all people of varying needs, but it gets people up close to the plant material, so you can gain an appreciation for texture and fragrance.
That space is designed in a way so that if you're in a wheelchair, for example, you're at the level of all the plants. The walls are raised and the plants billow over the sides. She was very sensitive to textures and smells in case you were visually impaired, for example. The signs in that garden have Braille on them. And so she was ahead of her time in a sense that now we would consider that a healing garden for people, you know, to experience.
Personal challenges would also see Claire battle and survive breast cancer. Through these difficult times, Claire Bennett always found strength in a special song.
I can't talk about this song because I'll break down. But the words get to me. Because through all your heartache and sorrow, you just smile, and tomorrow will be a better day.
This is my Harvard Alumni Association Award.
Today, at 90 years of age, Claire is retired from her life as a landscape architect, but her legacy here will continue for generations, for us to stroll by, enjoy, and perhaps smile at the trailblazing art of Claire Bennett.
You have 3 responsibilities in this world. You need to take care of your mind, you need to take care of your body, and you have to do something to make this a better world to live in.